to another episode of the Natural Herb Keeper. Now apologies, it has been quite some time since we got one of these videos out for you. We were through the crazy holiday festive season. It was also baby flying fox season, so there were a number of orphans here that we were hand raising, and that all occupied a fair bit of our time. Now during that period as well, I managed to break my phone and corrupt my memory card, so I actually lost all the footage of the build of the enclosure here behind me that I had planned to show with you guys. And I've been trying to work out how to go about showing you this build, because it is pretty cool. It's something fairly unique that I haven't done before with very limited footage that we have left. So in the end, I pretty much decided we're just going to jump in. I'm just going to show you guys around. I'll try and make up parts of it with the footage that we have left. And of course, if you have any questions, guys, don't hesitate to give us a yell so that we can answer any of those questions for you. Now, the enclosure that we're going to look at today is for my sub-adult pair of brown tree snakes. Now, these are my Northern Territory banded brown tree snakes. I also have an adult pair of Queensland banded brown tree snakes. And I'm actually going to introduce you to their babies a little bit later in the video. But for now, guys, let's just jump straight in, have a look around, and I'll explain the concept of this enclosure for you. Alrighty guys, so let's jump in and have a look. So before we start with, I guess I'll give you dimensions of the enclosure. So it is of course the same as the bearded dragon build that you've seen before. That's the one down the bottom there. And this stack is 1.4 meters long by 60 centimeters deep and 70 centimeters tall. Now my idea for this enclosure is that it can be one or two enclosures, so it is divided all the way through with just a small hole in the back corner that can be closed up or opened up depending if I want to house these two together or separately. And what I'm looking for, or the overall idea of the enclosure that I was trying for, is to make this look like a cave. Okay, so back in 2019 we were lucky enough to travel through the Kimberley, and whilst we were up there we came across a number of these caves that were absolutely full of brown tree snake eggs, and the odd brown tree snake popped up in them as well, of course. So I was trying to replicate that a little bit with these enclosures, okay, something totally different. And something that I thought would give the brown tree snakes a lot of area to use, okay? So these guys obviously are mainly arboreal. They want to spend most of their time cruising up around rock crevices, caves, trees, all that sort of thing. So I'm trying to replicate that here by having most of the enclosure full of perching and climbing opportunities for them. And there's just that little section at the back there that you can see that is open, and that's where the lights are all kept. So that sort of mimics like a little open skylight coming down through the cave, which is obviously where then you're going to find the plants growing as well. Okay, so if we're going to jump in and have a look at actually how we built it, it is exactly the same as that bearded dragon build that you guys saw me do before. So it's simply polystyrene that's been cut out to shape, placed around, covered in grout, and then painted. Now to get the shapes in this enclosure, I did go a little bit different to what I've done previously, okay? So most of them are hand carved and glued in together. This one I sort of stuck in my basic shapes that I was looking for, but because I wanted it to look like a cave, I kind of wanted everything to be fairly smooth, okay? Like those volcanic caves that you tend to find these guys residing in. So I actually ended up using a blowtorch on the polystyrene that gave me some pretty unique shapes. All right, let's go in here and have a look. So you can see some of the shapes coming through here. Fairly unique, fairly smooth, and something totally different to what I've done in other rock enclosures. So when it's come to, again, building these rocks, you can see I've got lots of individual rocks again on the floor of the enclosure. So like I've said in previous build videos, guys, I really do think that gives it that final touch. It kind of makes it look and join the entire enclosure together, make it look much more natural. And these rocks are built the same way that I've done previously, okay? So it's just polystyrene. Like I said, I actually used the blowtorch to shape them this time, and then it's a couple layers of grout on top of that. Now to actually get this really sort of smooth finish that you can see in these, which I think really quite well represents the caves that I was trying to mimic. I actually tended to flick the grout on, and flicked it on fairly wet, okay, so you can actually kind of see where it's run and sat in some of these. And I think that's a totally different texture to anything I've done before, but I was pretty happy with the overall result of it, and I think it really looks the part in terms of how these caves actually looked. So in terms of plants for this enclosure, I've gone fairly simple. We've just got a few ferns in here, and I have started trying to put a little bit of climbing fig in here, just to sort of add a little bit of accent and a little bit of extra greenery through there. I haven't had a great deal of success with that in this enclosure yet. It is fairly dry. I've only just sprayed it down and done the morning clean and water, that you can see the water droplets on it here today. And some plants have sort of died back a little bit, but that's okay, that's expected. Normally I'd have these plants in and running for a number of months before I put the snakes in, but in this case these two had well and truly outgrown their other enclosures, so I was pretty keen to try and get them in here and give them that extra space. Now I'm trying something a little bit different down here. I've actually got some of the climbing fig, and I'm just using a small container of water to keep it damp while it establishes roots in the dirt. So I've done this in some of my aquatic enclosures where there's part water, part land, and it's worked really well. So just trying it on this one to see if I can get it established using that water method. So I'll let you guys know how that continues. In terms of substrate for the plants, it's the same as normal. So the rest of this enclosure is basically just a mix of dirt, just straight garden dirt that came out of the backyard. It's that lovely brown color. It matched in perfectly to the rocks. And as we go halfway down the back here, this is where it actually starts to get into the proper planted soil. Okay, and this is on both sides. There's that hole I was telling you about before, guys, so I can seal that up. I've got a piece of foam that I've mock rocked to look like the rest of the enclosure that actually fits perfectly in there and seals that if I'd like to separate the two. But yeah, in terms of the soil, it's the same mix that I've used before. So it's garden soil or potting mix with a bit of orchid bark, sphagnum moss, peat moss, sand, some organic matter from my compost pile and my worm heaps, all mixed through there. So there's a drainage layer, of course, on the bottom with a bit of screen over the top of that. And then the plant soil mix that we just spoke about goes in, plants go in, and I've just used some basic leaf litter mixture on this one to keep it in that theme. Okay, there's a little bit of leaf litter around in here, and that of course helps then the cleanup crew. Now in terms of cleanup crew, I've just used a couple of different species of isopods, springtails, the standard superworm beetles, to help keep this one nice and clean, and they travel around in there quite a lot. You'll often see them popping out at night, cruising around on the rocks and doing a great job of keeping it really spotless in here. So being that they are tree snakes, okay, they are obviously a predominantly arboreal species, so I wanted to make sure there was as much usable space in these enclosures as possible. So I've stacked pieces of polystyrene before I shape them in all sorts of random locations, especially all up across the roof. So it's a little bit hard to show you, but this is the roof of the enclosure here, and as you can see, it is full of little holes and caves and crevices that these guys can get into, and they do use every aspect of this. Okay, so you'll often find them tucked up in all these tight little crevices. You can see some of them go all the way through, some are just little caves that they can get in and hide through in the day, and then of course there are plenty of spots for them to get down underneath some of these rocks. There's gaps behind some of these at the back where they can tuck in and feel nice and secure if they like. But a lot of the times I've actually been finding them basking up here under the UV light, which was something a little bit unexpected. Okay, I wasn't expecting these guys to use the UV as much as they do, but they're often, both of them are there at the moment. they're often found hanging out up there enjoying that UV. So again, another reason that we should be offering all of our species, regardless of whether they are technically diurnal or nocturnal species, the opportunity to bask under UV. So speaking of being nocturnal, I grabbed this little camera from Kmart the other day. I think it cost like $50. It's pretty cheap, but it does have a night vision setting on it. Now I'm still trying to work out how to use this, so apologies for the glare and reflections here, but I thought it was rather interesting just to pop in here and show you guys maybe something that we don't get to see that often. Okay, most of us don't have access to night vision recording equipment, but if you're interested and you're in Australia, this is a pretty cheap alternative, and just sort of gives you a little bit of insight into what your animals are getting up to when the lights are off and we're not around. So as you can see with this bloke, he is using all of the enclosure. He's using all those little nooks and crannies and crevices and holes and all sorts of things that I created in that enclosure for them to do exactly what he is doing right now. So just cruising around, checking it all out, having a great time. Okay, as promised, here's a look at a couple of the hatchos from my Queensland banded pair. Now Mum is a black and white banded female and Dad is a classic red and white. These two have just had their first sheds, and as you can see, they are looking pretty damn good. This one in particular I think is definitely my favourite out of the clutch so far. Okay guys, well that wraps us up for this episode. It's a little bit different to what we've done before, but I hope you still enjoyed it and found some useful tips and hints in there for building your own reptile enclosures and backgrounds. Now we do have some more videos coming, so don't forget to hit like and subscribe to keep up to date with what's happening on the channel. If you have any questions, don't forget to throw those in the comments for me. I'm happy to answer those. And otherwise, thank you, and we'll see you next time on the Natural Herp Keeper.